No, how would you?
Press when you're ready.
Teach you, inshallah. You know, I'll just open up here so I can see. 192. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله العلي الكبير خلق الإنسان وحثهم على التفكير والصلاة والسلام على بشير ونذير ما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Last time we started on Sahih, and then we showed this diagram about types of narrations that are accepted and types that are not accepted in terms of their category. So the first one is obviously Sahih, then you have Sahih li dhatihi, Sahih li ghayrihi, Hasan li dhatihi, Hasan li ghayrihi, and yeah, I'm going to get messages on the way because yeah, sorry about that. We need to think it's like a dummy phone. It's fine. Actually, I can just do this. Oh. It's all right. So, in terms of Sahih, what were the 5 conditions for Hadith to be Sahih? Brother Oli, you know this one. Without looking, without listening. Alaikum salam. Any. Aqal, yeah, that's one. So dhabt, so we call it dhabt, which is the precision in memory. Right, they have to have a good memory. Sheikh Hamza.
Free from
Illa, which is hidden defect, we're going to go to what that actually means. And whether you weren't here last time, but Sheikhna. Ittisal sanad, which is there has to be a continuity in the chain. There is no breaks in the chain of narration. And then Shadh is the other one. Yeah. So the Sahih Hadith, Sahih in the dictionary, what does it mean? Linguistically, healthy. It's the opposite of sick. Saqim in Arabic is the antonym of Saqim. It's a hadith which has a continuous chain going back to the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by upright people, reliable people, narrators narrating from upright people, and it's found to be free from any irregularities or defects which we mentioned. So this is the 5 conditions. One is continuity of the chain of transmitters. Can you guys see? Yeah, I'm scrolling in that, zooming. Continuity of the chain of transmitted going to the Prophet ﷺ. So there isn't a break in transmission. So imagine the brother here is the Prophet ﷺ, and you are transmitting from him, you are transmitting from him, you are transmitting from him, you are transmitting all the way, and then it comes back to me. So there is no break. Break means if, for example, you transmit to him and then he transmits to him, but then he doesn't mention you, he just says, I heard from him. But it could be that he died before he was born, so how could it possibly be that he heard from him? This is how they work it out. So they say this hadith is not sahih, right, based on that. So it has to have a continuous chain. That's number 1. Number 2 is integrity. We talked a bit about that, what integrity means. It's on the next slides as well. What is integrity? What is not of a valid critique when it comes to hadith, and people did use that as a critique, like of someone's integrity, that this guy's not a good guy. Remember Amash, Turkish horse. So some scholars, they said that because a certain person he rides a Turkish horse, so I'm not going to take hadith from him. That's not a valid thing to say that this person, it harms the integrity, because it doesn't harm the integrity, right? They think, oh, this guy lives in luxury, so I'm not going to take hadith from him. This is not a valid form of jar. Some people said that just because this person lives in a particular area, we're not going to take hadith from him. This is not a valid form of jar, which is discreditation. Then you have accuracy, which is the dhabt. This person has a good memory. Their memory didn't falter, and then we spoke about that. Free from irregularities, I think this is where we stopped, and then this ties on it. And then absence of a hidden defect. So how you establish adala? How do you establish that a person has a good integrity? Either through their fame and reputation. So it's well known in the land that this person is a reliable and trustworthy person. Also the testimony of contemporary scholars, and then we said that's debatable, because sometimes contemporaries will sort of say that you're not good, but it's because they have other agendas. Like for example, we know about Imam Malik, etc., with the things with Imam Hanifa, and then other people as well. Imam Nasai, who was close to Imam Hanifa's time, he said he's not a good narrator because he's weak. But obviously we know that's not reliable. Then how you establish dhabt. Dhabt is that precision in memory. How do you establish that? So you compare statements with his reliable students. We mentioned what that was. Comparing statements with his contemporaries reported from one teacher. Comparing his statements at different times. Memory. So they would, a hadith that is transmitted from memory, they would compare it with a written document. And we covered this last time. As well. What is an effective way to find disintegrity of a narrator? Like this narrator, we won't take hadith from him. What are things that apply and what are things that don't apply? One is that they're disobedient, they're fasiq, they openly go against the ahkam of Islam, they don't pray their prayers openly. Then you have, if this person is known to be a liar, that's number two. Then if they're an alcoholic, that's one, but even then, that's a bit debatable whether that construes as fisk or not. I mean, does that form into, if you look at here, doing a prohibited act, which one deems permissible? Because some scholars viewed Nabi as correct, and we spoke about that last time. And then disbeliever, obviously, you won't affect them. But what if someone concealed their disbelief? Would you take hadith from them? As in they were a kafir, but they just concealed it. Yeah. How would you know exactly? So you would take hadith from him because you judge by what is apparent. And al-amru bil-zawahir. And then after that, obviously, you'll find out if they lied and invented things. Some people even admitted just before they died, yeah, I admitted, I inserted so many hadith into your tradition. There's a famous guy, Ibrahim something. He's in the Bayquniya, in the Sharh of Bayquniya. A guy, he said before he died on his deathbed, I invented so many hadith. You won't find it. But the scholars who came later on, they were able to find out who invented it. They were able to pinpoint, because remember of the mastery that they had in Urdu. If it didn't match, then how would this even occur? So that's that. Again, these are things that are non-effective. So committing permissible actions, even customarily criticized, committing minor sins, doing a prohibited act which he deems permissible, and bid'ah, not leading to disbelief. So like we said, Imam Bukhari has people who are mubtadi in his Sahih Bukhari. He doesn't narrate from Shia people. And this is someone hears this for the first time, they're like, what? And Bukhari narrates from Shia. But then he has conditions to that. Which particular Shia group does he narrate from? Which we'll go into further.
You know, when you were talking about the Sahih thing, you didn't have, not at the beginning when I
Yeah.
Sahih Muhammad.
No, this is just the terms regarding what any hadith, is this authentic or not authentic, right? This is in terms of acceptability. There are grades to acceptability, and then its application. Not every authentic hadith is applicable. We don't apply it into our day-to-day lives because of various reasons which we've mentioned. Like for example, one hadith may be abrogated. So in the beginning of Islam, it was like this, and then the ruling changed. It could be that this hadith was for a particular situation and you can't understand it generally. It could be this hadith is general and you don't apply it to particular situations. So you need a holistic knowledge of the hadith literature to be able to make those distinctions and to be able to decide when to apply it and when to not apply it. So this is the whole science of fiqh, applying the hadith, dirayatul hadith is fiqh. So going back to criticism, okay, so conditions for the narrator is understanding and the memory. In terms of receiving, understanding and passed away in 855. Jalaluddin Suyuti was born in 852. So how did he transmit from him? Can you remember? Imam Suyuti is the last point that was mentioned. When he was 3 years old, how did he transmit from him?
From the students.
From the gathering. His dad took him to the majlis and he mentioned that my father took me to the gathering. But then, did he have understanding and did he have memory? Of course not. So does it fall into this? And this is why these conditions sometimes can be flexible as well. So according to him, he did. So transmitting knowledge. When you're transmitting knowledge, you have to be on the age of puberty when you're narrating hadith to someone else. In terms of that being to form part of the chain. I mean, of course, a pre-present child can narrate hadith. There's nothing wrong with that. But to form part of the chain, generally, you have to hit bulugh.
What about the hadith you had when you were before the age of puberty?
Can you narrate that?
After the age of puberty.
Okay, this is basically, if you hear it and you are of sound intellect, the scholars say that that's acceptable. For example, Qadi Iyad mentioned if this person, you would accept it if this child does have some sort of dhabt and precision, if he's okay in terms of his intellect. So you have Islam, that's a condition for transmitting knowledge, honesty, continuity of chain, memory since receiving till transmitting. Again, we said a person's memory can go bad at a certain point. And the scholars have pinpointed which students narrated from this particular hadith scholar after his memory became bad, and which students narrated from this hadith scholar before his memory was bad, when his memory was intact. So the scholars have know which hadith to take at what time. So they'll know that, okay, when Sufyan narrated hadith from Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, who was one of the scholars of hadith, then what does that mean? Did he narrate? Because Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i, at one time, he had really good, precise memory. Like he could transmit, he could remember. And this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But at a certain age, he became confused and he had like dementia or these neurodegenerative illnesses where he sort of faltered in his mind. And when he would transmit hadith, he would forget, he would mix it up sometimes. So did Sufyan transmit, this student of hadith, did Sufyan transmit from Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i before or after? Before. Sufyan, Sufyan. Sufyan al-Thawri. Again, there's two. So when we say Sufyan in hadith, we mean two. There could be two people that we mean. Sufyan ibn Uyayna and Sufyan al-Thawri. Right? And they lived at the same time. They had the same teachers. They had the same students. So it's very difficult to tell between the two. So you have to see from other sanads as well. Is this Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Sufyan al-Thawri? With regarding to that. So memory since receiving till transmitting. So until you got the hadith and until you impart it, you have to have a sound memory, and this is the conditions for accepting hadith. Okay, the next trait was shadh. So when someone described as reliable contradicts someone who is more reliable than him, or him or her, because hadith, we mentioned hadith transmission can be through females, and obviously it was a very Khatib al-Baghdadi, his teacher was Karima Marwaziya. He traveled all the way to Makkah, I think it was, to hear the whole of Bukhari from her in 5 days. She was one of the major transmitters of Sahih al-Bukhari, Karima Marwaziya. So hadith transmission can be through ladies as well. So, or where a narrator alone reports a hadith and his solitary reporting is not accepted. So the irregularity can be in the sanad or in the matan. Okay. So shadh, what shadh? مخالفة الثقة لمن هو أوثق منه. So what's that? Going against a narrator who is more reliable than this person. That's شاذ. And then إلا أن يكون الحديث معلولا فالعلة سبب غامض خفي يقده في صحة الحديث مع أن الظاهر السلام منه. So an illa is basically, it doesn't look like there's a defect. It's defined as a hidden defect in the hadith which takes away from its authenticity. What do I mean by that? We gave an example last time. That two people can have the same name. So when you look at it, they don't mention the full name. They don't mention if it's Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Uyayna. They just say Sufyan narrated from so-and-so, who narrated from so-and-so. So it looks like everyone in the chain, they've all got that adala, they've all got that integrity, and they've all got the dhabt, right? They're all got precise in terms of narrating and transmission, right? But it's actually a different person. And sometimes people do that to trick. Like, for example, if I have a hadith for my own agenda, right? Like I am part of a particular group or someone who advocates the raising of the hands in a particular way, etc. This I'm talking about early times. What they would do is they would just mention Sufyan. They wouldn't mention the full name of it. But it was up to the hadith scholars who came afterwards, like Al-Bukhari, etc., who knew, it was this Sufyan, because they compared it with other chains of narrations and that reached back to the companions. And we have those diagrams as well. It's going to come again. Like when the companions narrated from a single Sahaba, when the Prophet ﷺ narrated to the Sahaba, there were many Sahaba who heard it from him, and there were many, and they transmitted to their various students who went all over the world. So this same hadith exists in different parts of the world. So of course, people like Imam Bukhari who traveled various lands, right? He would go to the Hijaz, he would go to Iraq, and he'd find the same hadith in those two places because obviously the chain just continued downwards. So what he would do is he'd compare the two, and he'd be able to pinpoint who he actually was by their biographies and by their names. So hadith which has such a defect is one which appears to be free from defect at first, while after investigation it is discovered that it has a certain defect which would not be apparent without investigation. The defect can be in the chain of transmitters or in text or in both. This is a difficult diagram. And then Abu Huraira transmits to all these companions. Here Abu Huraira again, they put it twice just for sake of completeness. So Abu Huraira, he narrates to Hammam, Abu Salma, Abu Salib, Ibn al-Musayyab, Al-A'raj, Dawood, Maqburi, Ajlan, Qais, Muhammad ibn Ziyad, Ibn Sirin, Musa, Hanzala, Jabir, Atiyah, and Abu Salih, right? So all of these sub-companions heard from Abu Huraira, who heard from the Prophet ﷺ. So obviously they would travel. For example, Ibn al-Musayyab, where was Ibn al-Musayyab based? Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab, Musayyib. Both of them are Sa'id. I think Musayyab is Afsah, more liquid. But Sa'id al-Musayyab is Medina, because he was one of the main students of Abu Huraira. So Ibn al-Musayyab, for example, he stayed in Medina. Al-A'raj moved out, Dawood moved out. So they moved out to different places. Hence, when you're collecting the hadith, you'd have to go to those places to collect that chain that goes back. So this is just an example of that. So this hadith, which has those conditions, is known as Sahih li dhatihi. So an example of that, okay, even if one condition of these 5 conditions, which were what? Ittisal al-sanad, which is a continuity of the chain. Second condition. Integrity of the narrator, adala. Third condition. Accuracy, the precision of dhabt. Fourth condition. You have to be free from 2 things. One is shadh, which is irregularity, and illa, which is the hidden defect. These last 2 ones are very difficult to understand what they are, but in the examples you can see them. So example of hadith sahih is what Bukhari said. He said, Haddathana Abdullah ibn Yusuf, and we look at Abdullah ibn Yusuf. He was thiqa mutqin, so he had good integrity. And then he says, قال أخبرنا مالك. So Imam Malik ibn Anas, who's Imam Darul Hijrah, famous hadith narrator and a scholar of fiqh as well, he narrated to him. And we look at Imam Malik, who is he? Imam Hafiz. Then he narrated from Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, who was a faqih Hafiz, muttafaq ala jalalati wa ittifaq wa itqanih. So Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri was a famous hadith narrator. He narrated from Muhammad ibn Jubayr, who was also a good thiqah, good narrator, had good integrity. And he narrated from Jubayr ibn Mut'im, who is a Sahabi. When you look at Sahabi, you don't need to say if they're good or bad, because all of the Sahaba, Ridwanullah, all of the Sahaba, the brothers might know as well, all of the Sahaba, you don't need to look at their integrity, whether they're honest or just people. Why? Why is that?
Because they follow the sunnah.
Follow the Sunnah. And in the Quran, Allah affirmed their integrity when He said,
He is pleased with them and they are pleased with him.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhum wa radu'an. Radiyallahu anhum wa radu'an. Allah is people, MashaAllah, whole crew's here today. MashaAllah, the BSMS crew. Radiyallahu anhum wa radu'an. That this is exactly the verse, that Allah is pleased with them and He is pleased with them. So you don't even need to question their integrity. Right? You just look Sahabi, that's it. Eyes closed. But then, as-Sahaba kulluhum adul, wa laysa kulluhum. So it's a hard question, but the Shaykh knows it. Wa laysa kulluhum ma'soom. They're not all ma'soom. They're not all free from sin. Of course, some of them will sin. We don't know the state in terms of Allah, according to Allah, but we know they're truthful in their transmission. Right? Except for known munafiqun, who obviously it'll be well known about them afterwards. So, this hadith also is not shadh, and it doesn't go against that which is above it, that the Prophet ﷺ قرأ عن محمد بن جبير بن مطعم عن أبيه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, that he heard the messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم say, قرأ في المغرب بالطور. He read Surah Al-Tur in the Maghrib Salah. This hadith is sahih because it has a continuous chain. Every narrator from it heard from his teacher. And then there's ana, but that would be a separate discussion. Right, about an, because you need the diagram for that. So what is the ruling for hadith sahih? As in terms of applicability. Do you apply it straight away? If a hadith is found to be sahih, do you apply it straight away? Abdul? Do you apply it straight away? If a hadith is found to be sahih, do you apply it straight away?
No.
Sahih li dhatihi. Why?
Because it might be sahih, but there's other things you have to also look
There's
at.
also, it could be conflicting with another narration as well.
Yeah.
So obviously if it's in terms of like your akhlaq and things like that, like your character and things like that, then of course you accept it, then you follow it if it's found to be sahih. But if it's to do with the ahkam, the rulings of sharia, right, if it says, oh, certain thing, if you divorce X amount of times and it's a divorce like this, if it's to do with like transactions, you have to look at the other narrations which surround it, right? And you can only do that if you have a holistic outlook on the hadith literature. So that's the thing. So obviously it's wujubul amal if it's one of those. The snake. Slithering. Okay, so المراد بقولهم هذا حديث صحيح أو هذا حديث غير صحيح. So if someone says that this hadith is sahih, that means that the 5 conditions that were mentioned before, قد تحققت فيه, they were found within it. And it doesn't mean that it's definitely authentic, because we're talking about probability there. Because sometimes, even though I've got a really good intellect, I might just heard it wrong. And so sometimes I might just hear it wrong. Sometimes it could be that, a person tells the truth his whole life, but one incident maybe he lied, right? قد يصدق الكاذب, sometimes. That sometimes a liar can tell the truth. Sometimes a very truthful person, at one time they might turn a lie. So this is a game of probabilities when it comes to Sahih. Yes.
You know, when you are able to ascertain Sahih Buhari and then all the conditions about if it is defective or not, and all this kind of thing, then how does the opinion of the Imam, the 4 Imams, comes in terms of interpreting it?
This is a good question. And inshallah, the plan was today to cover that, inshallah, after, but I don't think we're going to have time because we've got something else.
All right.
Yeah.
Because I'm just curious what you were saying
Yeah,
now.
because I've got the presentation on the life of Bukhari, because the plan was, the other brother's not here, but a couple of brothers wanted the life of Bukhari, because we had an interesting question last time about Bukhari's life. So we're going to cover the life of Bukhari, and then after that, specifically Sahih al-Bukhari, how we understand that in terms of our day and age, how we can analyze that. But that has to be next week now, because we're going to run out of time. Yeah, go on, bismillah, bismillah.
If
how do you, when you were trying to figure out which if a Sahih
Yeah.
hadith, if you're trying to figure it out, still you need the opinion of some people to be able to negotiate that. So if you're not using before imams, and we're not talking about before imams now,
Yeah.
you will have to, you need some tools to be able to do that. How do
Yeah.
what-
Those tools are the usul al-hadith. Those tools are usul al-fiqh. So these are the tools that we're learning. How they graded the hadith. So then it's quite a deep thing. This is just an overview. But then I'm going to give some examples, not this time, next time. It was meant to be today, right? I even give a little lesson today to the kids about Imam Bukhari's life, which is way above their pay grade. But that's it, next time, inshallah. That's why, Luqman, you'll come next time, innit, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Imam Bukhari's life and applicability of hadith. So one example is the hadith إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ, actions according to intentions. And this obviously narrated by Umar bin Khattab. It's not a good diagram. Okay, this is better diagram. So Umar bin Khattab, he narrated it, and then it goes to, this is the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it, and then Alqama bin Waqqas al-Layth to Muhammad ibn Ibrahim at-Taymi, he transmitted it to Yahya bin Sa'id al-Ansari, he transmitted it to Sufyan. Which Sufyan, Maulana? Ibn Uyayna is there. And then he transmitted to Al-Humaydi, Abdullah bin Zubayr, and he transmitted to Al-Bukhari. And then Bukhari is the one who documented it. So Bukhari would look back at all these names and he'd see the 5 conditions. What were the 5 conditions? Ittisal al-Sanad. So is there a breakage in the chain? How would he identify breakage? Example, how would he identify? We mentioned an example. If there was a breakage in a chain, how would you rationally find out that this is not a linked sanad? Birth and death date. So if someone was born before, if someone died before the person was born, then he could not have heard from him. It's impossible. So it's irrational. Or if he never went out of his town, he never went to, they would do it. Again, the second condition is what? Adala. So obviously, if you look through every single one of these, they're all integrity. They've all got good integrity. How do we find out adala? 2 ways of finding adala: fame and reputation. The second way. One is fame and reputation. The other one, I just slipped my mind. Testimony of contemporary scholars. So people give testimony. So this is how we find out someone is authentic or they're weak, through the testimony of people who lived at that time. So here's another example of Sahih Hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ transmitted it to Anas ibn Malik, transmitted it to Sulaiman ibn Tarkhan, who transmitted it to Mu'tamir, to Mushaddad ibn Mustakhraj, who transmitted it to Al-Bukhari. Look at them. Anas ibn Malik, he was a companion. Sufyan ibn can you use the point on this? Okay, maybe not. Okay. There was that red pointer, no? The one on your phone. How come I can't do it on mine if yours is a 5S? That red pointer. You know that red thing, you know what I'm talking about, right?
No, ordering.
It's not this, but
So you can
the
draw,
red.
just draw.
Alright, okay.
So like,
Okay.
like
Okay. So you have okay. So Anas ibn Malik, companion, and then Sufyan ibn Tarkhan, thiqa hafiz, Amir al-Mu'minin fil hadith. So basically, it's just a comment on their life. This guy's a reliable guy. So all of them, they were really reliable. So this is just an example of a hadith, sahih. I seek refuge from you from the... Okay, this is the famous hadith about that dua. I think we should all learn, which is the dua. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-kasli wal-ajaz. والعجل والكسل وغلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. It's the same one. All Messenger of Allah, I seek with you from incapacity and laziness, from lethargy, from counting theoretical days, what we talked about last time in Medina was khutbah, about the age of decrepitude. How do you get away from the age of decrepitude? The age when you go back, like when you're like a child, how would you avoid that? Quran, read the Quran. So then books that you'd find Sahih Hadith. Okay, Luqman. So you'd find Sahih Hadith in Bukhari, and then we were going to stop there and do Life of Bukhari, but we just got too less time. We'll do that next time. Then Sahih Muslim, that's a book of Sahih Hadith. Ibn Khuzaymah, that's another book of Sahih Hadith, but again, it's one sort of grade down. Again, Ibn Hibban, some people don't accept that to be completely authentic. Some people question the narrations in it. Then you have the Mustadrak of Al-Hakim. Hakim, who's Hakim? Where's he from? Nisapur. Hakim Nisapuri. So then you have Mustadrak of Hakim. Okay, there's another hadith type of book. Do you know what time is? Yeah.
Said one of those books people question.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's because, they don't have the 5 conditions inside. So they look at the chain of narration and be like, oh, well, according to so-and-so, he's not got high integrity. Right? Or they might be, okay, this chain is not a continuous chain, there's a breakage there. Why is that?
What's the counters like? Why do people say this?
So then other people might say, okay, but it doesn't matter if there's a breakage in a chain. If someone who's really authentic, they've got good integrity, they will only narrate from authentic people anyway. So you're trusting that guy's thing. But then the debate goes on. But you have to look at particular examples to understand this correctly. What time is it? 5 past. 25 past 8.
Yeah, there.
Is it what's the real time?
It's about that.
25 past 8. Okay, we'll finish in 5 minutes, inshallah. So, actually, we're done with Sahih after this, isn't it? So, Mustakhrajat. So, a book which is a Mustakhraj book is basically, the definition is a scholar takes a particular book of hadith and narrates the same hadith but with his own chain without going via the original author of the book. The benefits is high sanad isnad, additional information, strength due to multiple narrations. There's no good diagrams here. We have to go a lot back to find those diagrams. It's quite a long thing, but anyway. So Mustakhraj is basically, you have books like Sahih al-Bukhari, which are authentic hadith books. And they've got A narrates from B, who narrates from C. It's easier with the diagram, but you can just use my hands. A narrates from B, who narrates from C, narrates from D. Right? So, particular hadith, all of these people are authentic. So what would another scholar would do, remember I said hadith can be in different lands. So he would find a different chain for the hadith, and he would find a different narration, but it links back at some point. So it will link back at a companion. So A narrates from B, narrates from C, narrates from D, and then there's another chain, right? And he'll find all of these are authentic, all of these are authentic. And what does that do? That adds strength to the original narration, because then it couldn't have been a lie. It makes it more authentic, because how on earth could he transmit the exact same thing and he lives somewhere else, right? So then this adds strength to it. That's one of the benefits of Mustakhraj. Sheikh, what's an example of a Mustakhraj? Sahih Muslim. The Mustakhraj of Abu Nu'aym al-Isfahani of Sahih Muslim. So he did the thing for the whole of Sahih, and that's the benefits. Books, again, you have Mustakhraj of al-Ismaili for al-Bukhari. He did all the chains of Bukhari. Then Mustakhraj of Ibn Abi Dhuhal, who did again for al-Bukhari. Then the Mustakhraj of Abu Uwana. Mustakhraj of Abu Hamid al-Harrawi. Mustakhraj of Abu Nu'aym al-Isfahani, which I said, Sahihain, he did Bukhari and Muslim. And then the Mustakhraj of Abu Bakr al-Barkani for Sahihain. So these are different people, they found their own chains for the hadith. All the hadith which are in Bukhari, all the hadith which are in Muslim, that just adds the contentment to that. Okay, so these are grades of hadith which are found in modern books as well. Like when we say, okay, what does it mean by both? What does it mean when we say agreed upon? It's just a translation of the Arabic term muttafaqun alayh. What does it mean? It's agreed upon its authenticity. Does that mean every single scholar in the whole world agreed upon in the authenticity? What do you think with this? What does it mean then?
Majority.
Nah.
Is it because they do the Mustakhraj and they find out that the source is correct?
I like the thinking, but unfortunately you're wrong. Actually, the guys. It's number one, brother. He's been pointing out for 5 minutes now. So if Bukhari and Muslim, if they say this particular hadith is authentic, that just means agreed upon. That's just a term that everyone uses in the whole world. If Bukhari and Muslim says it's authentic, it means that this hadith is agreed upon. It doesn't mean necessarily everyone in the whole world agrees upon in the authenticity. It just means these two scholars agree upon it. Again, that's the highest level of Sahih according to the modern understanding. But then, even then, there's a discussion when we discuss the life of Bukhari and his actual work next in my book, right? Because only Bukhari and Muslim, that's not the only source for authentic hadith. There's authentic hadith elsewhere. You understand? It's not like exclusive, like Bukhari and Muslim, there's Sahih hadith elsewhere, but they're just saying that it's a terminology that we use in hadith studies, that when we say agreed upon, what do we mean? Bukhari and Muslim agreed upon it, right? The second stage is just recorded by Bukhari. Third is recorded by Muslim. Why is Bukhari preferred over Muslim here? Why? Because he has higher conditions for his authenticity, which we'll mention next time. Authentic hadith according to the criteria of Bukhari and Muslim recorded by others. So that one example would be by Al-Hakim, for example, in the Mustadrak. So Mustadrak is a book that it's not Mustakhraj. A Mustakhraj is the same hadith they'll find with other chains. Sahih al-Bukhari fulfilled these 5 conditions. On top of that, it fulfilled these other conditions, right? For example, the famous one is Bukhari would not take from any 2 narrators if he knew that it was impossible for them to meet. Sorry, that's Imam Muslim. There has to be some thubut of them meeting. There has to be some sort of affirmation of them meeting. So it's not enough that, for example, Aman visited Manchester to hear hadith from me. That's not enough, right? There has to be some sort of, no, someone else saw me speaking with him and he must have transmitted the hadith then, right? According to Imam Muslim, he has a lower condition. He says, if they were born and died, if one was born before the death of another, that's enough, right? This is obviously the other conditions still apply, the integrity, the precision, things like that. But Imam Muslim has a slightly lower condition than Bukhari. Again, authentic hadith according to the criteria of Bukhari recorded by others. Then according to the criteria of Muslim recorded by others. So Mustadrak, he'll say, this is authentic according to the conditions of Bukhari. This is authentic according to the conditions of Muslim. That's a 6th stage. And then they'd say the last one is authentic hadith, but not according to the criteria of Bukhari and Muslim, right? Maybe the birth and death date didn't match up, but then that's a whole other discussion. Then we go into the Hasan hadith. We'll have to leave it at that. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Any questions? Luqman, I think you've got a question there.